Another episode of Fridays with Freddie. Fred, we're recording this just a few days before, the new administration takes over, inauguration. And one of the things we're going to be hearing a lot about that we haven't heard much about in the last few years is blockchain and cryptocurrency, right? There's going to be a lot of buzz about it. There's going to be a lot of action around it. And I just want to use this opportunity to kind of bring our viewers and listeners back to that basic and maybe very specific understanding of blockchain technology and how it's going to impact or could impact higher education. Just some use cases, just a reminder, because the idea of AI is here now, and you can kind of forget about blockchain is kind of a flawed thinking. In some cases, they may complement each other really well. In some cases, standalone blockchain is going to impact the industry in a big way. Talk us through it. Maybe start, if you don't mind, with a high level for some of our viewers who are executives who don't think about technology all day long. Just give us the quick 101 on blockchain, and then let's start talking about how it's going to impact the industry and why our leaders need to be thinking about it and having some serious point of view on it.
Sure. So blockchain is a type of database that you can only write to. So you can't update it, it gets written to what's called a block. So there's going to be a bunch of information, a bunch of data put together in a block, and that block gets hashed. And then
that's another way of saying locked down, so to speak.
Which is cryptography, right? So there's going to be a numerical representation code of that data. But then what happens is then when the next block is filled with data, the hash of the first block is included as data in the second block. So that's why it's called a blockchain. Blockchains are usually decentralized. I'm just going to use the word database, but they're decentralized databases, right, that are protected through cryptography. Because they're linked, in order for you to make any changes, let's say for a hacker gets into one node, right, because a blockchain has nodes, it gets into one node. There is something called a consensus mechanism. So before data can be written to a block, 51% of the nodes need to agree that is a valid transaction. It met all the requirements. It did all the cryptography, and then it gets written.
And real quick, a node doesn't mean something sitting on my campus and all my node is here. So if you hack my campus, you're in. Nodes could be spread all over the world, and there's no way for a hacker to even know where, in many cases, where the node is. So they'd have to go and hack 51% of the nodes holding and confirming this little block of data. That's okay.
And for example, in the case of Bitcoin, because everybody's been very critical that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, but of course now with the emergence of Gen AI, it's kind of quaint to talk about Bitcoin because Gen AI is sucking up so much power. It's incredible. We literally, as you know, Microsoft and others were asking to create mini nuclear power stations in order to power AI.
Just power the stuff.
Right. Yeah. It's craziness. But so data in a blockchain then becomes immutable, meaning you can't change it. And if you think about how the way we've ordered our society, even what the function is of a registrar office, right, is to provide that layer of trust that, hey, if I ask for a transcript from, the University of Ohio, it has a stamp, it has a watermark, signatures, etc. But because it comes from the registrar and the university provides that layer of trust. Right. What a blockchain now enables is, well, if I know for 100% sure that the data that I'm receiving has not been tampered with, impossible to tamper with, right? Until we get into the whole quantum computing discussion, impossible to tamper with. Well, I can now replace that layer of trust. The blockchain itself becomes the layer of trust. So that's why it has very unique properties. And then, of course, it allows for use cases that haven't been possible in the past. But the main feature, for me at least, for a blockchain is that you can now start to have transactions between peers, peer-to-peer transactions. Meaning, if I need a transcript, I could ask a transcript from a university. The university then automatically generates a transcript that is either anchored to a blockchain or written to a blockchain, depending on the blockchain. And the registrar does not need to be involved. They've just organized it. They govern it, if you want to call it that way.
They control what's in the SIS, right? And make sure that information is correct. You still need the SIS. Yeah.
Right. But trust is now provided by the system itself, the blockchain system itself. So I can ask for a transcript, I can share my transcript or my certificate or my badge or etc. And the receiver can know almost to 100% certainty that, okay, this has not been tampered with. This is 100% true. And Joe, amazingly, in the last 2 days, I had a call from a very good good friend of mine who's been in his industry for about 30 years, worked for several Fortune 500 companies, started to work for a new company, and somehow there's a glitch where they can't verify his degree through, the National Clearinghouse. The National Clearinghouse has some data that doesn't seem to be 100% correct. He said, well, I don't understand because look, here's what I have. Anyway, so there's a glitch somewhere, and it's causing huge friction points to the point where he's now at a position, at a point where he's like, I'm not sure if I want to work for this company because they don't seem to know what they're doing, and, et cetera. Blockchain eliminates that.
Interesting.
We've enabled one of our clients to have blockchain-enabled diplomas and transcripts. The students can request a transcript and then share it at will.
And I think what's interesting now is as we watch industry adopt on the other side, right? And industry is recognizing all the time they spend verifying a transcript and receiving the email and a human looking at it or whatever, or a diploma. And they're putting engineering in place to basically take that, digitally verify everything. Like you said, no human necessarily needed, except in the exceptions, in the really rare cases. That's one really interesting use case. Can you think of another use case or two that impacts higher education as it relates to blockchain technology and or AI together?
Right. So if you look at blockchain as a technology that can disintermediate relationships, right, and really enable peer-to-peer and automation, because one of the features of a lot of blockchains is they have something called a smart contract. Now, the contract is neither smart nor a contract, but it's just code. But the code has the same immutable characteristic as the data because it's blockchain based. So therefore, I can start to automate things. I can automate financial aid disbursements, for example, based on regular algorithmic rules. However, you know 100% sure that the rules are followed 100%, they're not tampered with, etc. And because it's blockchain and it's transparent, meaning you can trace transactions from initiation to settlement, it becomes a very powerful technology. But as you and I were talking earlier today, I said I wanted to use the example of cross-border payments. So today, cross-border payments, everybody's heard of SWIFT. If you want to send remittances,
a wire transfer,
MoneyGram, Western Union, etc. It's very expensive. It takes a while, even though when they say it takes your
we'll have it.
Behind the scene, it's 1970s messaging technology and a whole host of banks, intermediary banks, that are talking to each other, and that every bank that's in the middle will have a fee for, hey, Joe, if you want to send money through Bank of America has what's called correspondent banks that they work with.
Right.
And they say, no, we'll give Joe's client the money, but that's going to cost you 3%, 2%. And by the way, there is sometimes 3, 4, 5 of these financial institutions in the middle, right?
Where the money has to hop.
Right. If you want to put it in concrete terms, international payment traffic is really at the sophistication of sending mail versus email. It works, but there's a giant army of institutions and people that are involved every single day to enable cross-border payments.
So how does blockchain impact that?
Right. So one of the things that banks need to do today is they need to pre-fund accounts all around the world, in every country, in the currency of that country, in order to enable cross-border payments. That means there's trillions of dollars locked in these accounts around the world, right? Now, I'm going to get to
they essentially act as security, so to speak, or there's a bucket to pull from.
Right. One of the blockchains that is out there is called XRP. What XRP wants to do is say, no, international payments need to be as easy as sending an email. So I'm sending value through the XRP network. And then they have something called ODL, on-demand liquidity. And what it is using blockchain, it automatically takes the USD, transfers it into XRP. XRP then sends it to the account. And if it's India, it automatically changes it to Indian rupees. And in 3 or 4 seconds, you have the transaction. It's not just that you send the transaction is settled.
In a few seconds versus minutes, if not hours, right? Or if not days.
Correct. So if XRP gets adopted globally as the standard for international payments,
which it's looking that way.
Yeah. then that means that there is trillions of dollars of liquidity that's now available again to the banks to reinvest into the economy. Now, how does this relate to higher education? Well, we use the example of transcripts, right? But the way transcripts are transferred today is very similar to the way international payment is done today as well. I mean, it's either I send it through mail, or if in the case of Florida, where we have clients, they have their own system there, which again is
for inter-college, inter-school,
for inter-college. It's 1970s technology. It works. I mean, that's the thing, right? It works. I mean, every single day this works, but it's sending mail. Right? You're still sending mail. So industries outside of higher education are moving towards instant settlement, almost peer-to-peer transactions. And higher education will go into that direction as well. Like if let's say XRP does become a standard. We have several companies like Flywire, Transformate. I mean, all these companies.
All our payment platforms in higher ed that do international for us.
Exactly. What's the use of, why do we need them? Right? If a student from India can now use their own bank to pay the University of Pennsylvania, and they're getting paid in 3 seconds instantly for pennies on the dollar.
Right? Not these exorbitant fees that are getting clipped along the way. Wow, right. For schools that are doing a lot of international students, MBA programs, right, cash and carry kind of stuff, that's probably a significant 2, 3, 4% is a lot of money.
Right.
In fees.
Exactly. And look, now we're talking about blockchain, but there's all these other technological advances that are waiting in the wing that eventually it's all going to converge. AI with blockchain, for example, right? What is the number one thing that AI needs? It's data. What is one of the main concerns that people have today? Well, what data is being used and how is my data being used? And
that's huge in higher ed.
Right. And how do I know that, in healthcare, HIPAA, in higher ed, FERPA, et cetera, how do we know that this is being adhered to, et cetera, with these AI platforms? Well, this is where blockchain could come in. So blockchain, it's possible, and there's several platforms out there that already do that. There's one called Burst IQ, which basically takes all of your data, creates a digital twin of that data, anchors that to the blockchain, then institutes smart contracts. And now through the smart contracts, you as the student can determine, or a researcher, for example, or a faculty member, for example, could say, hey, here's the data that I allow to be used, and here's the data that I wall off. And you can do that through smart contracts. Again, you can set up all of these rules where you can become very, very granular. Now, if you look down the road into the future and start thinking about tokenization meaning I now have data that you can create a value for example. Now you can think of students paying micropayments, right? So instead of paying high tuition for an entire course, maybe you pay for parts of the course. But today, that's almost...
It's not possible, yeah.
It's not possible, it's not undoable, etc. But if you start combining AI with blockchain and tokenization, and on your internet, do you ever notice it says IPv4, IPv, right?
Yeah.
Which is your IP address? Well, we're running out of IP addresses. So that's why we created a new standard called IPv6. And we're slowly starting to move towards that. But what IPv6 now allows you to do, like for example, in your house, Joe, you have an IP address.
Right.
But your fridge that's connected to the internet, let's say you have one of those smart fridges, it doesn't have its own IP address. It's like, let's say, a subversion of your IP address, and there's services in between that need to mediate that. IPv6 eliminates that, right? IPv6 says, no, every IoT device, every smart device can have their own IP address. And then again, if you tie that to blockchain, you can now have peer-to-peer transactions. And if you now tokenize these things, meaning, let's say I have a Tesla, and my Tesla has cameras all around. If you go to a tokenized economy, your Tesla can become an income source through micropayments, where if another service wants to access your camera to see traffic locations or weather or etc., you could have micropayments. When I say micropayments, I truly mean micropayments, right?
Yeah.
0.001
fraction of a penny of a penny. Yeah.
Fraction of a penny of a penny. But if you start aggregating that, then all of a sudden we're flipping the model of how data is being used today from you are the product to your data becomes a source of income,
Revenue.
but you control it. So there's all these technologies that are converging, and it'll take a while. But for example, in higher education, if you look at what's on the horizon, now you can start thinking about decentralized education systems or learning platforms. Joe, let's think about this logically. What is a university, right? Yes, it's a community and people pay for that community. It's a network and people want to be part of that network. But the entire administrative layer of a university is only there to mediate the relationship between a learner and a teacher.
And the teacher. Yeah.
And the teacher and the knowledge. So there's organizations like Bitopia University out of Australia, Rafi, and I think we should talk about this. He's using blockchain. He's automated the entire administrative part. So admissions,
with smart contracts and all
with
this
smart
stuff.
contracts, etc. Yeah. And then also tokenize that. So, for example, he matches a student with a professor. They agree on a tuition.
So my IP is monetizable as a researcher, as a professor, as whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before that's happening. I mean, I think an administrator would be foolish to say, "Oh no, that'll never happen." It's not.
Well, look, there's
at some point it's inevitable.
And I'm not going to call this person out, but there's a faculty member at a prominent school who has a blog. Love his stuff. But one of the things he said was, "Oh, AI will never replace professors because the things that I provide go beyond just knowledge transfer." And I have no issue with that statement itself.
Sure.
But there's this nagging doubt in my mind where I'm like, kind of sounds like the New York City medallion holder yellow cabs just before Uber came.
Right. Yeah, I think the big thing is in all of this, as I'm listening to you, is it doesn't matter if I'm a faculty member, an administrator, someone in IT, or an executive. I can kind of put the blinders on and say, it's never coming. This is all hokum. We're just going to be on our 19 SIS's, version 2.0 for the rest of our lives. Or you have the choice to say, look, how do I learn enough about this to be dangerous? How do I create a point of view, right? And have a perspective in the event some of this stuff really does start to shift. Like if at some point professors can start creating content and monetizing it, what's going to be our point of view on that? How are we going to work with them rather than fight them? If there's a way to do faculty contracts faster and better, why wouldn't we do it rather than Susie and John and Bill sitting there pushing paper and sending reminder emails, to an adjunct to sign a document? Why not align with some of these emerging technologies and have a strategy? Doesn't mean you pull the trigger, right? That's your point.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, you can think of it not just from you being a higher education professional, but just as a citizen of a particular country in a time when we have several exponential technologies that are coming online that are going to impact all of society and all of your job. So what I'm saying is, when McKinsey writes a report and says 50% of all jobs will be replaced by AI in the next 10 to 15 years, that's not Freddie Krueger saying it, right? Yeah. That's McKinsey saying it. So let's say McKinsey is wildly off. Let's say it's only 20%. I mean, we've spoken about this. We've become so desensitized to these new technologies and the capabilities and the impact that, remember we had this discussion where somebody says, "Oh no, artificial general intelligence is not going to be there for another 10 years. As if 10 years is a long time, right? Yeah. Right? For a university, that's 2 graduating classes, basically. In regards to tokenization, don't believe me. Listen to BlackRock. BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, has said tokenization is going to be the next financial So, and if tokenization is going to be an innovation all through society, it's going to hit higher education as well. But what it will mean for a lot of researchers and faculty members and students, when you can start tokenizing your IP and automate, that into a source of income, because don't forget, and again, look around you. There's people, Joe, we're not trying, but there's people making money, making a living, being on TikTok and YouTube. right?
Yeah. A good
Event,
living. Yeah.
right, a good living. Eventually, there's going to be faculty member and researchers that are going to be able not just raise money through tokenization, research money, but also capitalize on the IP.
See, if I'm a CIO of a school or president of a school and I plan to be there for a little bit, I'm not looking for my next job to hop to. I would be listening to you thinking, okay, how do I start to build something where I can partner with my faculty when the opportunity comes? How can I provide them the platform where when it's okay for them to monetize their IP and everyone's going to figure out how, that I'm the engine they use, rather than I wasn't ready, I had my head stuck in the sand, and when the opportunity came, faculty started to go to third party portals and go somewhere else because they're gonna. I mean, who's not going to make money and provide for their family if there's an opportunity to make more, right?
Right.
Uh, and so that's really my encouragement to presidents and CIOs is just have some conversations about this stuff. Put a plan in place, even if you have to shelve it, but be ready to act versus scrambling like most of higher ed does. Wait to hear about it at a conference, and then everyone jumps on board whatever the person on stage is doing. But by then, you're late. You're following. Versus in a couple of these areas, some of our listeners could be trailblazers in making that all happen.
Exactly. And, listen to people like Brian Alexander, who's literally a futurist out of Georgetown University. Right? But what a futurist does is it looks at these threads and say, well, what are the possible scenarios here and what would be the impact? It just makes you more prepared as a professional in general to start thinking about these new technologies, right? But I think blockchain enable your transcripts and diplomas.
That's easy.
Certificates, that's fairly easy. I think your researchers might benefit from a blockchain-based system that can start protecting their IP, right? And if you could protect,
they share it, right?
Because they share it. Well, research is the interesting thing about research, of course, is that it's a solitary effort, but yet also a community effort, right? You work together with other researchers to then come to a certain point. If you can protect your IP earlier, means that you can start sharing
and collaborate sooner.
And collaborating sooner. Right, so that's a real impact right there. I think maybe we can close out with this. I think one of the entryways into the decentralized cryptographic world for higher education, which I believe this is the direction that higher education should go into, regardless, is on the identity side, on the cybersecurity side. Schools right now spend inordinate amounts of money to protect their data, as they should. Number one responsibility of a CIO is to protect the data. Yeah. But it's not just World War III, it's becoming harder and harder and harder. And the response to these increasing attacks and increasing sophistication of the attacks is to lock down more and more. But the more you lock down, the more you stop collaboration, the more you stop free flow of information, etc. So blockchain provides.
Think about it. The Treasury Secretary's laptop got hacked a couple of weeks ago, right? At least the news came out that it did, and half her staff. There's no amount of money you have in higher education in your IT department to truly protect. So this is where you've got to start thinking outside the traditional box and say, okay, what can I do? How can I leverage some of this stuff to really take our safety to a whole nother level, right? I'm sure there's somebody watching or listening who will say, I did my homework on blockchain and it's garbage. Call Fred, have a conversation, have an arm wrestling match.
Yeah, look, it's not about the technology. It's what the technology enables, right? And if you have a technology that now enables peer-to-peer transactions, and it creates a huge opportunity, a threat and an opportunity, I would say. But I love to talk about this stuff. I don't have all the answers, but all I'm saying is that if you have a technology that gets rid of the ledger, the kind of the intermediary layer that we have in society of any transaction, lawyers, notaries, registrars. I mean, there is a ledger or a database somewhere that holds information, and somebody needs to manage that information. If you now have if it's technology that could replace many of those, that is going to be impactful, like it or not.
And I think our point is, you got to know about it. You've got to be prepared so you're not caught surprised going, oh my gosh, we had no idea, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Fridays with Freddie. Hopefully you enjoyed today's session. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to share it with friends, because we want to kind of grow this community of thought partners in this area. A little sneak peek, we're actually starting to think about doing our first small conference and invite only 50 to 75 leaders from across the country, the big thinkers, the idea generators who we happen to know and they know, to just a couple day think tank sometime late this year. We'll invite you to Miami when the weather's not that great where you are, and just have some robust discussion. No sponsors, no vendors, just you and your peers in intensive conversations like this, unpacking use cases and wargaming out scenarios. So we're kind of behind the scenes thinking about that. And if that kind of piqued your interest, let us know, because maybe that'll push us over the edge to pull the trigger on some of the final planning. So have a great week.
Thank you.